Please, roll call.
Trustee Benucci? Trustee Fay?
Here.
Trustee Lamb?
Here.
Trustee Peck?
Here.
Trustee Rassich? Trustee Rippey?
Here.
Mayor Collins?
Here. Could rise for the pledge.
Presidential comments?
We have a proclamation. Accessibility Awareness Week, July 20th through the 26th. Whereas equal access to goods and services has long been fundamental expectation of all Plainfield, Illinois, and American citizens, and whereas on July 26th, 1990, the American with Disabilities Act was signed into law, and whereas Plainfield, Illinois, with a population of over 39,000, has many people with disabilities and seniors, and any number of other individuals who would benefit more from more housing options, increased public transportation, and improved accessibility. And whereas these citizens continue to experience barriers in these three categories, local businesses lose untold profits because of the lack of accessibility. And whereas accessibility advocates are focusing their efforts on the following priorities to address what they see as necessary to promote compliance within the community through leadership by the Accessibility of Will County campaign, encourage construction of more housing options, creation of more transportation options, voluntary efforts to remove structural barriers within local businesses, and increase compliance of laws requiring equal access by people with disabilities, and provide resources to individuals involved in utilizing that access. And whereas the Accessibility Will County campaign, which is broad-based network of community leaders, disability advocates, and business community representatives, should seek forces that within the Village of Plainfield to address the immense challenge of ensuring full and total accessibility for all citizens. Now, therefore, I, Michael P. Collins, President of the Village of Plainfield, on behalf of the village, do hereby declare the week of July 20th, 2014 as Accessibility Awareness Week in the village in honor of the 24th anniversary of the American with Disabilities Act, and continue our efforts towards increasing housing options, transportation, and accessibility for all citizens. Do we have anyone from this? Okay, we'll make sure that they get a copy. The previous week has been rather interesting, and so we're going to break a little bit from the format that we have and jump ahead. And we have a presentation of the EF1 tornado that was declared in town, and we're going to let the commanders here make a presentation. Go ahead, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor. My name's Commander Anthony Novak. I'm stepping in today for the Chief of Police who's on vacation, albeit he's well aware of what had transpired on the date of June 30th. But my job here tonight is to give you a brief, quick overview of what transpired on that evening. Basically, on Monday, June 30th, as everybody in the room is well aware of, at approximately 8:30 a.m., the National Weather Service placed the Village of Plainfield under a moderate risk for severe weather. Once that had happened, our alert went up. Commander Ken Ruggles and various members of the Plainfield Emergency Management Agency picked it up, continuously monitored the radar of the approaching storm, and made the necessary preparations to handle this. Just to kind of sidetrack really quick to make sure everybody's well aware of it, as I'm certain that you guys are, the Plainfield Emergency Management Agency all consist of volunteers, none of which are paid. They are all volunteers that give their heart and soul to the Village of Plainfield and make sure that we're safe. Each year, a total of approximately 10,000 plus hours of volunteer time is given to the Village of Plainfield, and they ask nothing in response to that. On the evening of Monday, June 30th, the Village of Plainfield encountered 2 separate storms. Commander Ken Ruggles will give you the exact timelines and what transpired during those storms. The National Weather Service issued a tornado warning encompassing the Village of Plainfield at 9:58 p.m. You're going to find out shortly that at 9:58 p.m., that tornado had struck Plainfield and had left Plainfield. After the warning had already been given, it was here and gone. So even with the warning, nothing could have been done to do anything other than what happened. And then from there, I'll turn it over to Ken, and I'll give you a closing statement as well.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and trustees. Chief Konopek had asked that I prepare a brief presentation of what we did to prepare for this storm and also what our response was. So on June 30th, as Commander Novak already indicated, at about 8:30 a.m., we became aware, obviously, that we were on the edge of a moderate risk zone for severe thunderstorms and possible tornadoes, as issued by the National Weather Service. Email communication had occurred between Chief Konopek and the command staff of both the police department and the Emergency Management Agency. We began to monitor the National Weather Service, radars, and all of their discussion regarding these storms and what it would produce as they moved through Iowa throughout the day. The major risks that were listed for us during this time was large hail, damaging wind, and possible tornadoes. But by 3 o'clock that afternoon, the National Weather Service had shifted the moderate risk area to cover all of the Chicago metropolitan area, and we found ourselves directly in the middle of that, so to speak. In preparation for these storms, the command staff of the police department and PEMA continue to monitor these storms as they approach. We watch the radars, we watch the storm system moving across Iowa, as I stated, and we also monitored the severe thunderstorm watches and warnings that were in advance of that storm. The radar image during that time showed a dramatic bow echo. This bow-shaped line on a radar is indicative of high-velocity straight-line winds out in front of a storm. Plainfield has previously experienced a situation like this with a derecho in years past, and in fact the word derecho was used several times that day during the discussions of the National Weather Service, as there appeared to be more than one squall line advancing in our direction at high speed. An email went out to all the police department and PEMA members around 3 o'clock. That email warned of the approaching storms, what the risks were, and also indicated that we plan to activate our spotters around 5 p.m. that afternoon, as the National Weather Service had indicated that these storms would approach the Chicago metropolitan area between 5 and 7 p.m. that evening. This radar image that was captured from NOAA shows the bow echo on the first storm line. As you can see in the red there indicated, there's a dramatic bow line. That is the shape of what we were looking at, and as I indicated, the National Weather Service will tell you that's indicative of high-velocity straight-line winds out in front of the system. That tends to push out in front of the system and form that bow shape, and that's what they had forecast for us, was high-velocity straight-line winds. This image was captured from the Storm Prediction Service, and it shows the modified time frames that came out later that afternoon. There was a delay. The storm appeared to have slowed down a little bit in its advance from Iowa. And in fact, now they were indicating that this storm may pass somewhat north of the Chicago metropolitan area, at least the center of it. And it actually would not be in the Chicago metropolitan area until closer to 7 and 9 p.m. Plainfield Emergency Management Agency activated its Emergency Operations Center and its storm spotters at approximately 6 p.m. that night. My position was at the Grand Park Water Tower, and these photographs are indicative of my view as that first storm line approached at approximately 6:39 p.m. that night. This graphic I created shows the locations of the storm spotters that PEMA had available that evening. As you can see, we post normally in this case on the west side of the community. The idea is to put our storm spotters out in front of the approaching system to give as much warning as possible to our residents. In this case, the storm is approaching from the just slightly north of west, and so therefore our emphasis was heavily on the northwest corner of town. That first storm struck between 6:39 and 7:15 p.m. It produced winds in excess of 50 miles per hour, some minor flash flooding, and several downed trees. As you can see, there's a list of some of the calls that we responded to immediately during and after that storm. including some minor flooding. We did in fact help remove at least 2 of the downed trees from the roadways to open roadways, and there was a minor power outage which affected the 127th Street and Van Dyke Road, crossing the intersection, running those lights flashing red. Immediately after the storm, the Emergency Management Agency, Fire Department, and the Police Department moved into a response and cleanup mode, answering minor calls for service, removing the downed trees. All this activity was ended at approximately 8 p.m. that evening, at which point we regrouped at the Emergency Management Agency garage and began to look at the next storm front that was moving in. That second line of thunderstorms approached. This radar image I captured off of my phone, so it was several minutes old at the 8:20 p.m. I have listed there. But as you can see, there were still many watches and warnings. The blue outlines are severe thunderstorm watches and warnings out both in front and behind that storm system as it moved into Illinois from Iowa. A new severe thunderstorm watch was issued for us at 9:01 p.m. and at 9:27 p.m. a severe thunderstorm warning was issued for our area. Again, FEMA has put its storm spotters out as best we could in front. This graphic appears to be a little dark on the screen, but again, the emphasis was from the northwest, the direction from which the storm would approach. We tried to do the best we could to spread out along that line at locations that give us the largest field of view with several miles in each direction, especially towards the skyline. At this time, however, at 9:30 p.m., our visibility was hampered by darkness and, of course, the driving rain that would arrive with this storm. Our first indications of the storm was rain, strong winds, and a lot of cloud-to-ground lightning at approximately 9:44 p.m. Wind speeds were estimated at over 50 miles per hour near Graham Park. We had a report of a transformer struck by lightning near Ridge and Caton Farm. Our visibility became extensively limited due to the rain driven by that straight-line wind and, of course, the darkness. We received a report from our dispatch of a possible transformer blown near 143rd Street in Diageo's. Power about that same time, 9:57 p.m., was seen to go out at Graham Park and trailing all the way down to the southeast to the 143rd Street and beyond area. However, approximately a minute later, we did see the streetlights coming back on in Graham Park, but obviously the 143rd Street corridor was still without power at that time and would remain so well throughout the storm and after. We also received a report of wires down Joliet Road and Route 59, or trees on those wires. And then finally, and at 9:58 p.m., I apologize, the red does not show on the screen very well there, but that's when the National Weather Service issued the tornado warning. This graphic here was created by Sergeant Brent Oots of the Plainfield Emergency Management Agency on Wednesday, actually after the storm, using both the storm damage survey that was conducted by the National Weather Service on July 1st and the Doppler radar data for GPS that they provided. Important on this graphic is that the storm is believed to have begun at 9:55 p.m. in an area due west of Route 126 and north of 143rd Street, along all the ponds and wetlands area there. It proceeded almost straight east, and at 9:56 p.m., it was actually detected by Doppler radar. At that time, it was already in the reserve subdivision and was about to cross over I-55. At 9:57 p.m., the National Weather Service decided to issue their warning, which of course was received at 9:58 p.m. This storm path was approximately 3.5 miles long and moving at 55 miles per hour. So at 9:58 p.m., this storm had only almost blown itself out and was already in Lakewood Falls and Romeoville. The warning that was issued by the National Weather Service, I'd like to just read part of it for you. States specifically, tornado warning, 9:58 p.m. Central Daylight Time, Monday, June 30th. The National Weather Service in Chicago has issued a tornado warning for southwest Cook County and northwest Will County until 10:30 p.m. At 9:56 p.m., National Weather Service radar detected a severe squall line capable of producing tornadoes that may not be visible due to heavy rain. It was located near Plainfield and moving east at 55 miles per hour. The hazard, of course, was listed as a tornado with a 100-mile-per-hour wind gust, and the source was radar-indicated rotation. This was the first indication that we received out storm spotting that there was any rotation in this storm. None of our spotters had been able to view any rotation. None of them had seen any debris as of this point. The damage to power infrastructure and damage to trees was consistent with the National Weather Service's earlier prediction of straight line wind damage exceeding 75 miles per hour. At 9:58 p.m., we received a second report of the transformer on 143rd Street east of the police department. We believe this to be the same one at Diageo's. At 9:59, immediately after receiving the National Weather Service warning, I had a brief discussion with all the storm spotters as to what they could see and what observations of damage, if any, they had seen. We also requested at this point that the National Weather Service warning be read across the radio again, indicating its locations and times. At this point, we believe this storm to have passed us and that we were dealing with the straight line winds that had preceded it. At 10:05 p.m., the winds began to decrease in the northwest ends of town, along Grand Park, and also out by Ridge Road and Route 126. We continued to receive reports of water on pavement, minor flooding, damage to electrical infrastructure, trees down, multiple trees down, traffic lights being out due to power outages. We deployed stop signs at 143rd Street and Wallen Drive. We responded to those flooding calls at Ottawa and Illinois in the downtown. At 10:33 p.m. was the first report of any damage in the area of 143rd Street and Route 126, and it was made by our personnel responding to the area, noticing numerous tree branches and partial trees down across Route 126. At 10:55 p.m., we received a call from a resident indicating there was a smell of natural gas and a possible gas leak in Reserve Circle. This was the first reported indication of any damage or any problems in Reserve Circle. I'll move along there. The gas leak was located and turned off in Reserve Circle, and at which point I was one of the first responding units and noticed that, in fact, the fence surrounding this house was completely blown out to both sides. The gas leak was actually resulting from a barbecue grill that had been yanked out of its gas line attached to the house. After securing that gas leak by simply shutting off the valve, myself and fire department crews began to circle Reserve Circle and found that we could not pass due to the number of tree branches and trees that were down across the backside of the circle there. At this point in time, I made contact with several residents and also learned that multiple houses had damage, including roofing, siding, and a window blown out. Immediately summoned additional units from PEMA and the police department, and we began to do a door-to-door survey of those residences to make sure we had no injuries and to see what the extent of damage was. I also requested that the National Weather Service be notified that we did in fact have damage to structures that at this point I believed was inconsistent with the straight line winds. We also responded to wires down in the area of 143rd Street east of Route 126, where we would remain well into the following day due to the fact that ComEd was unable to get to those wires, and those wires remained a hazard for many hours. The following slides indicate some of the damage I was able to photograph that night. Specifically, the downed tree there is Route 126 and 143rd Street. That small picture there, and I apologize for the darkness, extended for several hundred feet on Route 126. When I arrived in the Reserve Circle, as I said, numerous trees were damaged in front and behind the residences. The house here on the left, the blue tarp that you can see in the photograph is where a window was completely removed from that house, the frame and all. The photograph on the right shows where that window landed in front of that house. What struck me about this and why I photographed it is the window was on the wrong side of the house for where the straight line winds were coming from. They should have actually struck the front of that house, and we found the window on the wrong side of that. If it was blown by straight line winds, it should have been in the backyard, in my opinion. The photograph on the left shows the house immediately across the street, the siding being ripped completely away, showing the underlayment there. And the photo on the right is the same house from the back, showing the soffit and fascia being damaged. The photograph on the left shows the shed in the backyard of that residence. You can see that many of the contents of the shed remain, but the walls and most of the roof and everything else was missing. The photograph on the right was taken July 1st, the following day, when I returned to the subdivision to get a better viewpoint, because obviously at night taking photographs can be difficult and we had our hands full. The fence you see there is the fence surrounding that barbecue grill with the gas leak. The following photograph here is the other side of the house on the left-hand side there. Both sides blown outwards from the backyard. Photo on the right shows some of the tree damage in front of residences. And these two photographs are taken from the cul-de-sac on the other side of Reserve Circle, again showing tree damage to the neighborhood. On the photograph on the right, the frame you see across from the car at the side of the driveway there is actually a trampoline. The night that I responded there, I found that about halfway down the block wrapped around a car. These photographs, a gentleman saw me out taking pictures July 1st, invited me in to see his backyard. As you can see, the tree damage was rather extensive. He had other damage as well to his home. These trees were both blown in a westerly, southwesterly fashion. Again, the storm was approaching from the west and was blowing to the east as far as straight line winds. So you can see that the trees actually fell the wrong way as far as what I was told to expect. And then these last two photographs here show some of the damage in the area of Route 126 Silver Lane and Route 126 and 143rd Street. Again, large trees blown over and damaged. In summary, the National Weather Service conducted a storm damage survey the following day. That afternoon, they finally confirmed that, in fact, what we were struck by was an EF1 tornado. The National Weather Service indicates this storm had maximum winds of approximately 95 miles per hour and a path length of roughly 3 miles, traveling at 55 miles per hour again. It began in Plainfield and ended in Romeoville. The damage included, by their count, over 50 downed trees, mostly uprooted, as well as minor damage to numerous residences in the woodlands of the Reserve and Lakewood Falls subdivisions. FEMA in their door-to-door survey noted 21 homes in the Reserve Circle that had some form of damage, whether it be trees or building materials, but no reported injuries. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the building department to do a survey of what they found.
Thank you. The building department received a copy of the initial damage assessment report from FEMA in our emergency staff meeting the morning after the storm, July 1st. There was a list of 21 homes with damage to the siding, fences, fascia, and roofs. There were also 2 homes that reported window damage. All of the addresses were in the Reserve subdivision located south of 126, just west of Essington. The building department went out to the Reserve and verified and confirmed all the damage that was on the damage assessment list. Our department did not receive any calls for structural damage. The limited amount of calls our department did receive were to ask when the power would be restored. I would just like to give an invitation to the residents of Plainfield. If there is any other extensive damage to the buildings in Plainfield, please call our department. We're not aware of any extensive building damage at this point, any structural damage, and we'd be glad to come out and visit. At this time, turn it over to Alan.
Thank you, Dean. As with any of these storms, and this was a little more severe than most of the storms that we've had in the past, Public Works responded shortly after the storm had occurred. We provided barricades and signs to secure the sites that included the traffic signals that were out. We also dispatched equipment and personnel to help cut and remove the trees to open the roadways and to assist FEMA any way we could in that matter, in that fashion. The following day, we completed an assessment and we started picking up branches that were related to not only this area, but also other areas in the northern part of the community. We have about 100 parkway trees that were damaged. We had many private property trees that were damaged too as well. We started picking up branches the day after the storm, and we'll continue picking up branches that are in the parkway this week. Lastly, we were in regular communications with Commonwealth Edison because we did have some of our own facilities that were out of power on backup generators or other emergency power situations. And we did communicate with Commonwealth Edison on a regular basis. Not only the Public Works is concerned and the village is concerned about our facilities, but also the residents' concerns that we had received as well, that we forwarded those along to Commonwealth Edison to seek their assistance in that matter. Of course, it's their utility and their responsibility, but we were in regular communications with Commonwealth Edison.
One final note, as I mentioned earlier, Chief John Konopek's well aware of what transpired. He personally has reached out to the Will County Emergency Management Agency, and he has asked them to conduct an independent review of our policies and practices as it pertains to severe weather, our storm spotter program, and also our preparations and the actual response on that given night for the 2 independent storms. And then lastly, the chief is also attempting to facilitate a meeting with the National Weather Service to discuss severe weather protocols, and he hopes to receive valuable information to utilize for future severe weather incidents.
Gentlemen, that was an excellent presentation. Even though I have to ask, because I've been asked, by the time the National Weather Service announced that there could have been a tornado, was there any indication or any evidence that would lead you to believe that the sirens should have been activated prior to 9:58?
Mr. Mayor, it was my opinion as the senior official for PEMA and the police department when I received that warning that the storm had passed us, that we were dealing with damage only consistent with straight line winds. I did not know that a tornado had dropped out behind my line of spotters and had in fact damaged Plainfield already. We received no reports. We had no indications of debris. None of the warning signs that my spotters have been trained to look for a tornado had occurred along the line of spotters that we had deployed. Our first indication of rotation, as I said, was the National Weather Service, and quite honestly, at the point where I could have activated the sirens, I believe the storm had already passed us and that it would be more of an insult to our residents for it to come on after they had already received damage. So I did not activate it. It was my call. I did that based on the input of all the spotters, many of whom have been doing this longer than I have with PEMA. It was their opinion fed up to me that we had in fact not received the damage that would indicate that we had been hit by a tornado. We believed we had been hit only by a straight line windstorm at that point.
Thank you very much. Like I said, I really appreciate PEMA, Police Department, Building Department, and our Street Department that are still, might add, picking up branches throughout the town. So I really appreciate these guys put this together very short, but it just goes to show you the level of notes that these organizations take in the timetable. So if there's ever a question, all these times are right to the minute of what they were doing. So it's much appreciated. And that's all I have.
Trustees' comments?
Kevin, I have just a brief question for you. And to be really clear on this, I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback in. You're not in the hot seat. I appreciate what you did, and I certainly appreciate what PEMA does every day with going out in these storms. The only question I have is 9:52, when you lost visibility, would it have been better at that point to have an abundance of caution and just sound the horns?
It was a consideration. However, at 9:52, I didn't have the National Weather Service's warning yet. At 9:52, our visibility had dropped. Again, darkness, rain wrap, there's a whole lot of phrases that have been thrown out there about whether or not you can see a tornado at darkness and night approaching. Part of the effort in spreading our storm spotters out is it gives us different angles of view in the hopes that at least someone will see an indication that there is something. I know I've been asked at this point by several residents is, in looking back at my decision, would I have changed things? If I had known that a tornado was going to drop out, by all means, yes, I would have.
I know you would
activated
have,
it.
yeah. And I'm not asking for
Just
that.
don't feel at 9:52 it was warranted yet based on our protocols. We have had this debate with the National Weather Service on at least 3 occasions in my 20 years with the village about whether or not we've been hit with a tornado. 2 of those occasions, despite the evidence we've presented to them, they've said no. On this occasion, they said yes, almost 24 hours later. At 9:52 or 9:58, I don't have that clarity. I make the best decision based on what I had, and I stand behind the decision. I had no indication at 9:58 p.m. when I received that warning, other than that warning, that we had in fact been impacted by anything other than straight line winds. So I don't think that at 9:52 it was warranted sending off the sirens. Again, these sirens are they are intended for outdoor warning, and I know that is some miscommunication, some miseducation that we are going to address in the near future. The sirens are not intended to warn people in their residences. If they were, they'd be so loud that those living immediately underneath them would be deafened by them. They are intended to get people who are not aware of an impending storm or risk to them to seek shelter and seek additional forms of information. The siren can't tell you what the threat is. The only way for you to understand that is to go inside radio, television, cell phones, computers, whatever you do have available. We highly recommend the National Weather Service radios that monitor the Weather Service bands to get that information, to know what you're supposed to do and know whether or not that risk is for you or for someone else. When we set these sirens off, they're for village-wide. The residents in the south end of the community were not impacted the same way the north end of the community was. So setting off the sirens at 9:52 or 9:58, I just didn't have anything warranting it at that period of time. And again, personal note, had I known what was occurring 3 or so miles behind my head, yes, obviously setting them off would have been a much greater consideration, but I just didn't have that information at the time.
Fair enough. And then my other question is, do we communicate with the surrounding areas as we go in Yorkville? I assume we do.
Yes, we do. We monitor several of the agencies coming out of Kendall County, including the Kendall County Sheriff's Dispatch. We monitor multiple EMAs surrounding us. We have a direct line of communication with the National Weather Service that we can activate and get their direct feedback. We frequently, especially for large events in town, phone them first and tell them we have a large event so they're aware of it, and they put us on a list to be notified of impending weather situations and the like. Example would be last year's Plainfield Fest, which is approaching again this year. We were on a list for them that, hey, we have thousands of people in our downtown and we are at risk to suffer greater injury because of that. I know that there's been some conjecture as to whether or not we had warning based on Earlville and Lisbon, which are two other communities that were impacted that night. We had no indication prior to actually Tuesday, when it was confirmed that those communities had also been struck by small tornadoes, that there had been any damage in those communities. So the units responding to those areas were again faced with a similar situation that we were. We had been predicted to have straight line winds and some damage from winds, but the exact nature that a tornado had struck was never made clear until the following day.
Thank you.
I guess I probably live the closest to it. It passed within a mile of my house. So the picture shows, one of the pictures shows my house. But as far as I'm concerned, I was aware of things around 8:30. A tree was down on Napier Plainfield Road. FEMA was out there, blocked that off. That tree got cleared off. So I went to find out where the tree was. It was already gone, and the road was opened up again. At 9:58, as you said, National Weather Service put out a warning, if you will, imminent, and my laptop lit up. TV was showing, a lot of stuff going on. So people, I think, probably knew about that. I don't find, I think what you described makes good sense. I think your judgment, we've had a number of straight line squalls pass through here. We don't want to set the alarm off for every one. Although I think people might hear it the way it is now, because I was hearing a train horn 2 miles away from my house at 3 in the morning. If you can hear the train, I think you can probably hear the tornado warning system too. But I think overall the things that were done were excellent. I think your procedures are good. You had people stationed out there looking for this. It was dark. It's a lot easier to spot things in the daylight. Middle of a rainstorm and it's really dark. It's tough. And it was not a huge tornado. It came down in Plainfield and then went, 3 miles east of us. At 9:58, the Weather Channel, or weather announcement said the storm was moving 55 miles an hour, and it was already at Lamont, well past us. And my family saying, "Hey, should we go hide?" Well, we ended up, going out to an area without windows, but it was past us. I look out the window and say, "It's not going to be an issue." So. I think the procedures were as well as they could have been done. Could we do better? If we knew what was going to happen for sure, yeah. But you made the judgment based on what you saw, and it just happened to touch down where we were and did minimal amount of damage, and fortunately nobody was injured, which is a very key part. So I think you guys did a great job.
Commander Ruggles, your report and Commander Novak was excellent, as reiterated. You know, the whole point this evening, you know, hindsight, there's an old saying, hindsight's always 100% accurate. You can look back and say, I woulda, I shoulda, I coulda, you know, all of this. You know, this isn't a particular evening for you to beat yourself up over a decision. And, you know, and that's, you know, there's a whole world out there, and I heard people very critically saying, why didn't someone do this? You know what, there's an old thing, I've had a few years on my belt in living. You know, if the storm's blowing and the trees are bending to the ground, you really don't need a tornado siren to go off. As you specifically stated, the tornado sirens are for people who are outside of a residence, not for those inside a residence. You know, that's a real important issue to clear up. An awful lot of times people say, oh, I didn't hear a siren. Well, maybe your television was on too loudly, or you had a headset on, or you're doing this or that. I think we have to put some of the responsibility back on ourselves. The decision that was made that evening was a decision that was made. Fortunately, as a number of trustees stated this evening in your own report, there was property damage, but there were no deaths, no fatalities, no personal injuries. I know it possibly could have been a situation like that. You know, another thing, I was at home, and to make something light of the issue, my wife said, why don't you go look outside? I said, why don't you go look outside? I was thinking, it was a toss-up as to see who was going to sacrifice themselves. I said, why don't we both just go to the basement? Hey, that's a good idea, too. And the whole issue is, I think, you know, when we were both my wife and I were just joking about that, kind of joking about it, I was thinking about all the Pima volunteers, spotters. I could remember about a year and a half ago, our trustee, village administrator he was a tornado spotter when we were going to have a big village meeting at Plainfield North High School, and he was responding to the fact, I would not want to be placed in that situation. In the dark, oh, is there a tornado around? I don't know if there's a tornado around, but I'm going to put myself, and you know, all those individuals are volunteers. And I think anybody who has been involved in not only government, but any volunteer organization or in any organization, the first individual that offers a suggestion is the first volunteer. And oftentimes, like I say, we had 10,000 hours of Pima volunteer. How much could you pay those people to go stand outside to see if a tornado was coming? Would you do it? If you say yes, get involved in Pima. We need you because they're always looking for volunteers. And I'm not bemoaning the fact that, oh, you know, this situation occurred. I wish it didn't happen. Of course we don't want it to happen. But it did, and a decision was made, and as I say, fortunately no one was personally injured. There was property damage, but we can repair that. And one last thought on my part. Thank you, Pima. Thank you, Plainfield Police. Thank you, Building Department. You rally around an issue. There was a problem. You rally around to try and make the best of a bad situation. And oftentimes that's the only thing that we can do. And thank you all.
I'd like to just agree 100% with what Trustee Rasich has just said. I'm not going to repeat everything other than thank you, Commander, as well as everyone in the police department and our volunteers on Pima that put themselves in harm's way, okay, to keep us safe and make sure that we're notified as soon as possible when something does look bad. And I can't imagine, you know, you mentioned that the sirens are meant for people that are outside to go inside. I can't imagine who in the right mind would be, other than Pima volunteers and police officers, who in the right mind would be outside during that weather to have to know to go inside at that point anyways. I sure was in my basement watching television, listening to my weather radio, hoping that nothing bad was going to happen. Thank you.
I have a little different perspective since my husband's one of the ones that were out there, and he was sitting on a hill out by Arbiter and Ridge, out by those schools way out southwest. And, you know, I just always know that they're well trained, and I just don't really truly think of it in a worried situation. And, you know, and then I pay attention to what's going on and things there. But I can see the other side of it too. So we did debate that a little bit. And so maybe the village used to do that. Pima used to host the weather spotter classes and things that were open to the public, because I know this because I'm involved around those people, or I would be thinking the same thing about the sirens and everything. So really, in fairness to the public, that's what I would be thinking, that the siren was there to alert me as well. And again, I am not blaming anyone. I totally support your decisions. Kind of as commander, was a tough call, but I can see both sides of it, and I can see where the citizens don't understand that. So I think part of it is a communication thing. It's like I said, I have the advantage or disadvantage, whatever you want to call it, of being around this a lot, and I really think that it is, and it's very difficult at night to see that. But as soon as Tom Skilling said rain wrapped, that was, I guess, the description in 1990, and that was enough for me to go to the basement, which doesn't happen easily. So I would say that that maybe some more of those classes coming up, some presentations, so people can have a little more information on, what's available to them and what the expectations can be. But it was a tough call, and believe me, I know what it's like when you guys are out all night. The storm spotters are called out when the sun's still shining. And that's when we start to know, because they're already watching the radar all day long. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, but so maybe the next thing is just more community interaction or something like that. So thank you very much.
It's a very good point that you bring up, Trustee Benucci. That's exactly one of the conversations we had as well today, that we would like to have a little bit more of an education campaign, probably starting with next year's storm season, at the beginning of the storm season, as well as to have another storm spotter class. And perhaps there would be some other volunteers that would have an interest in coming out and at least learning how to spot for a storm. It doesn't necessarily mean that you would have to volunteer to join PEMA, although we certainly would appreciate the extra volunteer hours. As you know, PEMA does do quite a lot for our community. They besides going out in these various storm events, they're also tasked with managing a number of community events. You will see them out at Plainfield Fest, which is coming up here rather soon. And as well, whenever we have a 5K in town, we certainly seem to use them for every single one of those. So with that, thank you very much. If there are any other questions.
A couple other quick comments. One, you had a training program, Plainfield East, maybe 3 years ago. And I think one of the weather forecasters from Chicago came out, and it was very educational. I would recommend doing that again, because I think it was very helpful. It told people to try to get the weather radios and so on and follow that. So I think the more knowledgeable you are, the better off you're going to be. I think we need to also think about setting the alarms off too frequently. There have been a couple of occasions when the alarms did go off, at least one that I remember for sure, and didn't even look like the weather was bad and nothing happened. And so you end up crying wolf too. So you got to kind of balance that. So it's a judgment call, and nobody's perfect, but do your best with the best knowledge you have. National Weather Service has probably the best equipment around for tracking this stuff, and if they weren't concerned until 9:58, I think it says quite a bit. It's not a matter of our own judgment, but other people who have more expertise than we do really weren't aware of it yet. So it's one of those things that happened to fall down us. Slightly different subject, though. If you got straight line winds, there are 5 trees over on Van Dyke that I wish they would blow over. They're deader than a doornail. I wish they'd get out of there. They're not our trees, I understand, but please blow them down.
We did lose quite a lot of trees. Unfortunately, we had hoped that all of them would have been ash trees. You're absolutely right. We weren't so fortunate.
Are there any other trustee comments? Not, this would be the time for public comments on items not on the agenda, not to exceed 3 to 5 minutes per topic. If there are no public comments, and we'll proceed with the business meeting. For seeking a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda. Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Rassich? Trustee Rippey?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. We're seeking a motion to approve the minutes of the board meeting held on June 16th.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, I'll proceed with the roll. Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Rassich? Trustee Rippey?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. We're seeking a motion to approve the bills paid and bills payable reports for July 7th.
So move.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, I'll proceed with the roll. Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Rassich? Trustee Rippey?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. We're seeking a motion to adopt ordinance number 3164, increasing the Class F liquor licenses to 16, the Class K liquor licenses to 17, and the Class K1 liquor licenses to 7 for Sovereign LLC to be located at 24205 West Lockport Street.
That is my motion.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Hearing none, I'll proceed with the roll. Trustee Benucci?
No.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Abstain.
Trustee Rassich?
Yes.
Trustee Rippey?
No.
I got 3 yes, 2 no, and abstain. Mayor Collins?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is retail strategies presentation.
Thank you very much. As you recall, we hired the services of Retail Strategies a few months back. Retail Strategies is a national company out of Birmingham, Alabama. They provided an update to our psychographic profile as well as consumer demands and leakage and analysis within our community. As well, with their services, they also act as essentially our outsourced retail economic development specialist. And with that, Chip Rogers is here to provide you an update on what they found in doing the psychographic profile of our community and the like. So I'll turn it over to Chip and provide an update.
Mayor Collins, trustees and staff and interested citizens, thank you very much. I will hope my presentation is as compelling as the last one. That was pretty good. I know that I live in Texas and I'm from Oklahoma, so I understand weather, but seeing all the documentation that goes behind that is pretty impressive. So hats off to your team. As Mr. Murphy said, we were retained earlier this year to work on behalf of the Village of Plainfield with retail recruitment strategies. And that's what we're doing. So I'm here tonight to give a brief status. If I can take 5 or 10 minutes, answer any questions, and we'll let you get on with your meeting. As you know, retail is the lifeblood in many of our communities. And one of the challenges that we see taking place across the country is market analyses being completed, and then those municipalities, villages, cities, chambers of commerce, economic development groups struggling with what to do next. And that's really where I think we add the most value, is what you do next. But you have to base that on the research. That's really where we establish the baseline of what are the opportunities in the market and what do we do with those. So as you can see, we've gone in, and this had been done several years ago by another firm. We came back and did the updating to a lot of that information. So the demographic reports, market analysis, the market segmentation, looking at peer communities, what are the spending habits of the consumers in the market, what is the retail inventory in the market, and how does that compare against the demand, and establishing those gaps and those voids in the market for what retailers need to be pursued. One of the differences between our companies and others is we don't come back and say you need to target this company and this company and this company. We say there's a demand in the market for this category. Let's pursue all of the people and see which ones we can work most closely with to make decisions to move into the market. All of this information beginning this week will be available for staff to see in our system called Basecamp. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. One of the reports, and this is just a sample, there are actually several pages of reports behind this that can be made available to our entrepreneurs in the market, our local businesses, anyone that's interested in the retail health and has opportunity in the market, they can access this through staff. But one of the reports in this is effectively an audit report. We call it an accountability report in our group, but that gives you the ability to look and audit what we're doing on your behalf 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if you choose to do so. So every time we have a discussion with a retailer or a developer, a property manager, anyone associated with our efforts on behalf of the village, that information will be posted into Basecamp. So who are we talking to? What's their level of interest? What properties are they interested in? What are the next steps? When is the next contact, et cetera, et cetera. So you have access to this information. So really to get into that market analysis, it's really coming in and helping you understand how retailers are looking at this area. So we do that with a series of drive times, and we also look at concentric rings, and you can see what those consist of. At 5 minutes, you have 12,839 population. But what we really want to go to market with is the strategies. What happens at 10 and 15 minutes? What do our incomes look like? What do the gaps look like in the market? And who should we pursue to fill those gaps in the market? You have available properties. We want to make sure we're getting the right people, the highest and best use for each of those properties. You can see kind of the same exercise done with a concentric ring if you choose to have this information as well. So some of the highlights in the market, and I'm going to have to put my glasses on. I apologize. I have to see here. One of the things that we did in this is what we call a tapestry segmentation. So if you've ever used a credit card to make a purchase, if you've ever purchased a car, if you've ever voted, if you ever purchased a movie on cable or satellite television, all of that information is tracked by market groups. And quite simply what we're doing is compiling and aggregating that information to help us understand who are the consumers in the marketplace. So we can start looking at the segmentation. We can see one of the high market segments here is up-and-coming families. One of the things that's always exciting to work with communities like the village of Plainfield is very strong demographics, and you're doing the right things. Your median incomes are good, your households are good. It's refreshing to see the types of things that are taking place and to be able to do that. So one of those is up-and-coming families. We can see the demographics behind those people. I won't read this all verbatim, but we'll make this presentation available to all of you through Basecamp. Boomburbs. They all have nice, funny names. If you are in one of those unfortunate communities that's a Rust Belt, aging, and pickups and shotguns, and you can see some of those market segmentations have kind of catchy little phrases, and they're not all complimentary, but they're all complimentary here. So sophisticated squires, you can see who those folks are. And then that peer analysis. So one of the things that we did in this project is went out and looked at other communities, other trade areas across the country that had similar characteristics to the village of Plainfield, and started highlighting. Some of those are certainly in Illinois, but some of those we get into Wisconsin and Iowa. You can start seeing what we're starting to look for. But one of the pieces of this puzzle is now being able to go into these peer markets and inventory what retail is taking place there, what retail concepts are in those markets, and which ones are missing. So that gives us a great place to start talking to a retailer and say, hey, Plainfield looks like your communities where you've already made store decisions here, here, and here. We want to have that same conversation with you. So we're going through that process in that. And then that gap analysis. And excuse me, I'm talking fast. I know you've got a long agenda and you've had a lot of meeting. But one of these, again, is our goal is not to come in and say, here is the retailer that you have to pursue. It's here are the gaps in the market, and here are all of the retailers that can fill that gap. Now let's target those that fit your vision, that fit the goals of the village, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the gap analysis. So we can see the types of opportunities we see: specialty food, full service restaurants, family clothing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can go down that list and see what those gaps are in millions of dollars and the number of retailers we feel could be supported in addition to what's here without hurting those retailers that are already in the market, which is a key piece of this. If the market is saturated, we don't want to go out and create even more competition when that doesn't make sense. So we want to make sure we're doing this in a thoughtful way. So we can start seeing the site selection process, and this is what it looks like. I'm not going to begin to try to describe every one of these bullet points in this slide, but I think what this does demonstrate is that this is a very complex process. There are lots of pieces to this puzzle, to this rubric, to the matrix that has to take place before a store opens, from identifying opportunity to the store opening, developing merchandising plans, et cetera, et cetera. In effect, what we are doing is acting as an extension to your staff to accomplish this slide. This is what we're doing, everything except for developing the marketing campaign and developing the merchandising plans for the retailer. Although, as part of our process, we're providing intelligence for those people to use in that planning. So this is really, it's a convoluted slide, but I think it does demonstrate what the complexities of this are. One of the challenges that we see municipalities, cities, chambers of commerce, et cetera, again, making time and time again, you have market analysis, and then you try to do the recruitment in an ad hoc fashion. So you don't have full-time staff dedicated to it. Sometimes it's elected officials trying to do it. Sometimes it's our village administrator or an assistant administrator trying to do that, and it becomes ad hoc. So we start and we stop, we start and we stop. I think that the key to what we'll be doing for you is bringing the continuity to work with you throughout that continuum, from in understanding the opportunity to store opening at the end. One of the pieces that we did in this process is we came in with the real estate group and spent a significant amount of time literally driving from address to address in the marketplace, documenting what retail is there, what are the available properties, what are the infill, what are the redevelopment sites, et cetera, what sites need to be repurposed. Maybe we've got something sitting on a hard corner that we think may have opportunities to do something else with, so we're looking at those recommendations as well. As I said, we developed that available property catalog, and you can see what that looks like. Our task now is to start discussing with those property owners, the brokers on those sites, or the retailers interested in them, and playing matchmaker and doing that on your behalf and looping your staff in on all of this process. This map is flipped, it laid out a little better. Mr. Murphy said he liked this view better than the view I did with the vertical, so I'll give him that. Yeah, I'll take one. I'll follow my sword for that. But the beauty of this is that what we see coming into the market really aligns to the comprehensive plan that was done by the village. So this was done without, as an independent review of the market, and this shows where we feel there's long-term redevelopment opportunities, where there are big box opportunities, where there are infill opportunities, and you can see those in the marketplace. So as I mentioned, our goal now is to start this recruitment process. It's really who makes the most sense, and we can support one or two of these in the market, or five in the case of restaurants. That doesn't mean we want to limit our conversations. We want to have discussions with all of those players, because we know there's greater opportunity to land one when we're having those broader discussions. It's just a deeper list of opportunities. So you can see that the types of retailers that we are targeting on your behalf in those categories, so there's specialty food, family clothing, restaurants, supermarkets, furniture, hardware, computer, men's clothing, women's clothing, great brands. And again, I want to compliment you. These are pretty good opportunities when we look at them. There are some good names here, and that's testament to the people that live here. and the types of retailers that want to be close to them, and that's what we're targeting on your behalf. So our objectives going forward are to leverage the strategies of our relationships with national network of retailers, restaurants, developers, investors on behalf of Plainfield, focus on marketing the three primary retail development, new development, and infill opportunities in the market, communicate with local real estate professionals and support their efforts when needed. One of the things that I think is key to helping those folks understand that are in the real estate community, we are here as a tool for them. As a board, you have outsourced this to provide value to those folks in the market. So when someone comes in and says, hey, we're looking at this, or you see an available property, you need to put them in touch with staff who can put them in touch with us, because our job is to help them. Our job is to bring opportunities to those commercial real estate folks in the market, and we're very, very good at that. So we want to be engaged in that way. Aggressive outreach marketing campaign to targeted retailers and restaurant prospects through our outreach, tenant representatives, preferred developer relationships, and the industry conference trade shows, primarily the International Council of Shopping Center shows. Typically, this presentation that I'm doing for you now would have taken place a little bit earlier in the process. But based on when you contracted with us, when that was executed, the International Council of Shopping Centers National Trade Show was in Las Vegas very quickly after that. So we wanted to make sure our efforts were dedicated to getting the materials ready for the village and starting to have meetings on your behalf out there. And we did have several of those meetings. It was very early in the process, and we're doing the follow-up with those folks now, but that is taking place. One of the tasks that that are associated with our work is working with retailers to overcome objectives. I've got a store already in Romeoville, or I've got a store at the Joliet Mall. We're too close. Our job is to help show those retailers that there is opportunity in the market. There are multiple opportunities. We're serving a larger area. Our demographics and our psychographics are very strong. So how do we overcome those objectives? That's our task in this process. Connecting landowners with developer prospects where needed. And again, that's something that we certainly want everyone to know, that these tools are available to our landowners, our commercial real estate representatives, to let them know we're an avenue for them and a tool for them. Connecting leasing and brokerage professionals with potential tenants. Focus on projects that died with the downturn of 2007 and 2008. A lot of those projects are starting to come back to life. Our growth has happened. Our residential growth is happening again. Investment is opening up. The banking community is opening up. So how do we respur those discussions? And that's where we're deep in those discussions here. And present opportunity to retailers during portfolio reviews. One of the benefits we have with our recruiters is we're representing multiple communities. So if you go to a retailer independently and say, I want to have a meeting with you, it becomes very difficult. They've got lots of opportunities. They're looking for low-hanging fruit. We get to leverage multiple communities, and there's efficiency in those numbers. So when we go to a retailer, we can say, we have 6 communities where you're a fit. We have specific properties that we're working with that community on. We want to talk to you about those 6 or those 10 or those 12, whatever that number happens to be. And it becomes leverage for us to establish those meetings, and it is taking place. This is just the back end report, and this is a very long spreadsheet. I just gave you kind of the top lines to take a look at for this presentation, but it goes into setting, how many square feet are available, who is the property owner, who's brokering that, who's the rep on that, and we go through all of that information, and that's updated in an ongoing fashion. And then the marketing guide. As I mentioned, one of the things that we wanted to make sure in advance of the International Council Shopping Center Show that we had the materials ready to start having those portfolio reviews on the behalf of Plainfield when we were talking to other retailers. This is what that marketing guide looks like. It's a lot of information for you to try to see from back here, but it's a front and back. It is brevity in this. What we were trying to do is create follow-up conversations. We're not trying to sell them and close them to move to Plainfield on day one. It's to create conversations about what do the opportunities in Plainfield look like. what is the real estate, who are employers, what does the tourism look like, all of that, and that's all encapsulated in this marketing guide. So going forward, as I said, starting this week, staff will have access to Basecamp, provide immediate support where needed through research and networking. So if someone comes in and has a specific request regarding retail and needs market research done, we do that on your behalf, and we simply post that to Basecamp. We're looking at new and emerging concepts that are appropriate for Plainfield. We are beginning to prepare for the International Council of Shopping Centers regional show, which will be in October. We will be representing Plainfield to regional developers and tenant brokers and retailers that are present there. We'll be updating this research in 2015 and 16. We're going to tweak as we needed, represent Plainfield at industry conferences and trade shows, advise on incentive requests as needed, and communicate with the stakeholders regarding our process. Questions? Sorry, I'm from southeastern Oklahoma, and when I start talking that fast, watch out. I get a little tongue-tied. So hopefully we caught everything, and I didn't use any mixed metaphors or anything like that. So.
You did very well, Chip. Thank you very much.
Very much.
Actually, our first meeting with the stakeholders after presenting this to you tonight is actually tomorrow morning. We're meeting with the Economic Development Advisory Task Force, and Chip will be providing them with a little additional detail as to what's in here, and we're really happy with what we see in the results.
Thank you.
A couple of questions or comments anyway. Can we get a copy of this report? Because you spoke nicely, but there's so much information on the charts. I like to spend a little more time looking at them. So
we will post this
to
to
Basecamp. Send email to us. I'd really appreciate that. But let me ask kind of an off-the-wall question for you. You had people who were driving around and looking at our situation, and put yourself in our shoes. Should we be excited about the prospects? I know the services you can provide, and we have value for that because you do things that we can't do, and that's good. But I'm looking at the probability of success.
I am ecstatic with the possibilities here, if that tells you anything. And I do this a lot.
That's what I was after.
Yes.
Looking for individual perspective. You had a chance to look at us in some depth, and we like it here. I hope some other people do too.
One of the opportunities that you have is you had a number of projects in 2007 through no fault of staff, no fault of anyone here, that they simply evaporated. And I think, if nothing else, we know that land is there. We know that there are landowners and developers that are interested in that. Can we make things happen with that? You've had other retailers that have looked at the market at fits and starts, and our job is to get them back and interested. So I couldn't be more pleased, and I will tell you that the principals of our company that have been here are also very pleased with that. And if I may, and your staff may shoot me for saying this, but I've done this for a long time, and working with the staff at Plainfield is as enjoyable a process as can be done. They're open, intelligent, informed, and I'm not just speaking about Mr. Murphy, but Mr. Garrigan and Amy DeBoni and all of those people that we've been able to work with are just fantastic people to work with, and we certainly appreciate that. And one of my principals in a meeting, following a meeting as a postmortem, he said, if every one of our clients was engaged like those guys, we would be successful everywhere. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. Can you get us a Chico's? Because I know Trustee Rath.
They were on the list.
Yeah, there's a. No, I'm not going to say it. Nope. Nope. Be nice. I'm never nice. Anyway, Mr. Rogers, Chip, a question. You know what? I know you're selling a product, and that's wonderful because we like the product that's being delivered. If you were to sell Plainfield, what would you say the strongest points are? We continually sing the highlights of Plainfield. I looked at your very detailed selection of very high-end companies, and Taylor, Chico's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Realistically, are they ever going to come here?
Yes.
You think so?
I think your demographics and psychographics support them. The independence of the trade area. I'm not guaranteed that we're getting those. A lot of things have to happen, but your traffic, especially along 59 on the north end, and what you can pull from that trade area. Remember, the trade area is not just
Sure.
the city limits, but it's going to start pulling in from those surrounding areas. I think so. I really do.
You know, if there's one thing I could be excited about, it's a simple fact that oftentimes people don't realize. I spoke with Mr. Murphy, Mr. Garrigan, and yourself. The leakage from Plainfield to those other shops is outrageous. I mean, we're losing an awful lot of money. If we could bring those businesses to Plainfield, high-end ones, the money's here because your statistics indicate that we have the ability to buy. And so what other points would you say are strong for the village of Plainfield, other than?
Well, you're open for business. I mean, it's your demographics, your available property, but it's also that you've hung out your shingle and said, we're here to do business, we want you here, and we're going to actively recruit those retailers, and I think that adds value as well. I think this is probably the Mr. Murphy's 4th or 5th year in Las Vegas at ICSC.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Is that correct?
5th year, yep.
Again, those relationships that are being built are invaluable. You know, and when we talk to folks on your behalf, we want to engage where it makes sense, but we also at times will say, somebody will say, well, I already know Brian, and we're comfortable with that. So
Sure.
if you can support us, great, but you know, we have a pretty good relationship. So
I could remember when our economic horizon was so bright in 2008. We had so many things planned, and then the economy obviously did the giant loop, and now things are really starting to turn around. So I guess we should be pretty excited, and I'm really happy to see that your program is really coming forth with our village. It's great. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Chip.
I am going to break down and
Yep.
'cause I've got another meeting early in the morning,
Yes,
so
you
I'm
do.
going to get a night's sleep here. Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is zoning code text amendment.
Yes, very briefly. I wanted to just, again, I've been requested to provide a very brief summary with regards to proposed ordinance, with regards to the proposed medical cannabis regulations. What is being requested, again, is approval of a special use for distribution centers for cannabis centers in the I-1, I-2, and B3, and as it relates to a special use in I-1 and I-2 for cultivation centers. So there are some questions about that, so I just wanted to provide a very brief summary of what's before the village board this evening as it relates to your consideration of the proposed ordinance.
Are there any comments or questions?
I do. I have a brief comment. I just want to indicate, I know there's some talk back and forth on whether or not this is an approval at this point, and I want to be very clear that the village is very limited in what we can do as far as regulating or restricting these facilities under the state law. In fact, the state law doesn't allow us to restrict them at all. They've preempted home rule unit, or home rule authority in doing that. By putting in place these zoning restrictions, we're exercising the full authority that we have to exercise to have any control over this whatsoever. If we don't act at this point and we don't put these zoning restrictions in place, in effect, it opens up the entire village, as long as they don't violate the specific state requirements, to open up anywhere in the village. So what we're doing here, this isn't a blanket approval. This isn't saying that we're approving these facilities. They're still going to have to come before the board. In fact, what we're doing is restricting their ability so that they do have to come before the board. We can choose the locations that they go to or deny them. But in fact, this is the only thing that we really have the authority to do under the state law, and we are exercising every ability that we do have. So, and I also want to be clear in the fact that just because we've approved I-1, I-2, and B3, once the three, there's 3 licenses that'll be issued in all of Will County for dispensaries. I don't think there's any really area in the village where we would be able to allow a cultivation center just based on the state regulations alone. So really what we're talking about are dispensaries. Once the 3 licenses are issued within Will County, which should happen in the next month or so, this is akin to the riverboats. It's not they can't just open up later on. Those licenses will be issued, and there will no longer be licenses issued after that, just like you can't just open a casino anywhere in Illinois right now. Those licenses are very limited in their number and their scope. And frankly, I don't know if we're going to even get one in Plainfield, but again, I just want to be very clear in the fact that we're limited in what we can do and how we can restrict these things. So thank you.
May I produce a condensed version of that? Because it's very eloquently said that we don't have much control. What we're doing is exercising the control that we have, very limited control, and we are exercising that. We're not saying we want this in town. It's not approval of the idea of having pot in town, but this is our only mechanism for controlling it, and we're doing our best to do just that.
Trustee Lamb, you can't use an expression having pot in town. That's language of the street, I don't think.
Well,
no, I mean, you know what, it's a medical thing. It's not as though, you know, we're going to be having pushers on the street corner. I understand what you mean, but it's medical cannabis, not pot. Thank you.
Tried to translate simple words.
Are there any other comments or questions?
I guess I've heard both sides, different arguments for and against even looking at zoning for this. And I mean, I'll repeat what I said before. This is still illegal according to the federal law. The DEA's website clearly says this is illegal. I didn't have my vote in Springfield on this, so I have my vote here tonight, and it's no. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad though that we clarified a few things, because when we say something is special use, as to what both the trustees have said, it has to come in front of the board, and we know it's there. Something can't just go in, something can't just be approved without coming to the board first. That is the whole point of having the special use criteria put on certain areas, whether it's medical, buildings, or sometimes it's churches. There's a variety of special use criteria. And I think that's very important to make that distinction, that again, this isn't a matter of illegal or legal or any of the things that are going on from the state or the federal government or whatever. It's a matter of, at least we know that any information on this topic has to come in front of us before it can actually be approved or not, or whatever the case may be.
Are there any other comments or questions? Not. We're seeking board consideration of a motion to adopt ordinance number 3165, adopting the proposed text amendment to the zoning code to incorporate regulations for cultivation and dispensing of medical cannabis pursuant to the Compassionate Use of Medicinal Cannabis Pilot Program Act.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
No.
Trustee Rassich?
Yes.
Trustee Rippey?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is Living Faith Assembly of God Church. We're seeking board consideration of a motion to adopt an ordinance granting approval of a special use to permit religious assembly for the Living Faith Assembly of God Church at 24119 West Riverwalk Court.
So move.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. Are there any comments or questions? That ordinance number's 3166. Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Rassich? Trustee Rippey?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 14915 South Bartlett Avenue. We're seeking board consideration of a motion to approve a certificate of appropriateness for a picket and privacy fence located at 14915 South Bartlett Avenue.
So move.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. Are there any comments or questions on this item?
Yeah, just a quick comment. There's quite a bit of discussion at the HPC about this particular thing, and they did recommend that it be approved, and it is an improvement in the appearance. It's replacing a log, as the pictures show, a log type fence, which really isn't appropriate in the historic district. This fits in better with the neighborhood, and it will be an asset. So I commend the people who are proposing to do this and willing to do it. It'll make things better for that area.
Michael, I have a brief question, because I know Bartlett Avenue, those folks who live on that street are very involved in the HPC, and they're also very involved in what's going on in their neighborhood. Have there been any specific outcries or complaints of the neighbors regarding this?
No. I mean, there was some extensive discussion about the materials, whether it should be a natural material, i.e. wood or vinyl. The majority of the HPC supported vinyl, but staff's not received any feedback from any adjacent residents, which have basically objected to what's being proposed by the applicant.
Are there any other comments or questions? Not, the motion was made and seconded to approve a certificate of appropriateness for a picket and privacy fence located at 14915 South Bartlett Avenue. Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Rassich? Trustee Rippey?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Administrator's report?
None tonight?
Management Services report?
I have one item for consideration tonight. As the board is aware, the village is a member of the Will County Electric Aggregation Group, which is comprised of 16 Will County communities and was formed back in the spring of 2012. By having such a large aggregation group, it forms what would be considered a large buyers group. Over 85,000 residential and small business accounts were formed, and through the aggregation RFP process back in 2012, First Energy Solutions was selected as its electric supplier at that time. A fixed 24-month rate was negotiated at 4.83 cents per kilowatt hour of 100% renewable energy, which at this point is a 36.5% savings over the current ComEd rate. Back in the spring, the Illinois Power Authority, who purchases electricity for ComEd, announced that their June 1st rate was 7.596 cents per kilowatt hour. So over the summer months and through October, residents and small businesses within the village of Plainfield are realizing the savings. But again, the contract is up for expiration in October. And part of the renewal process, what's before you tonight is just a recommendation to approve the extension of the intergovernmental agreement to allow for the village to be a part of this aggregation group moving forward. This agreement needs to be approved by July 17th, and what will happen is it will allow the timeline to move forward and the RFP process to move forward, as well as not having any interruptions and any switches back to ComEd during this time. As it is right now, if the board chooses not to approve the extension of the agreement, all of these accounts would move back to ComEd in October, and as I said, as it stands right now, residents have the option today to choose their own electric provider on their own. The aggregation provides a larger buyers group and a better buying power, so the rate that the residents and small businesses are seeing is typically a better rate than what they would see in the open market on their own. So should the extension not be approved, again, all accounts would move back to ComEd, and residents would still have the option to research and select their electric provider on their own. Staff's recommending, though, that the village board moves forward and approves the extension of the intergovernmental agreement so we can get the best rate possible for its residents on the contract that expires in October. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'll make that a motion.
Second.
Yeah, it's clear. There's no downside to approving it. You're negotiating. Don't come up with something better than ComEd, we don't have to do it. So there's absolutely no reason not to continue, because we've saved the average resident $300 or more per year in the last 2 years. So it's a great program. I think we ought to continue it.
Are there any other comments or questions? The motion was made and seconded to approve the extension of an intergovernmental agreement with the Will County Electric Aggregation Group. Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Rassich?
Yes.
Trustee Rippey?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Engineers report.
A packet of, or a progress report has been included in your packet. Any questions that you may have on any of the projects, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Just no particular comment on what you have tonight, but I did mention earlier the whistle being blown in the middle of the night. Either some car was on the tracks that shouldn't have been, or an engineer didn't realize that we're a whistle-free area, but might be worth, it was about 3:20 in the morning, I don't know, 4 or 5 nights ago perhaps. But the other thing about the trains, which I didn't mention earlier is that Canadian National seems to be a lot busier. I happened to go across 135th Street tracks 3 times in a half hour, and there were 3 different long trains that were running through. The first one stopped me for 6.5 minutes, which is a lot longer than usual. The other 2 I didn't time because I wasn't there at the beginning. You know, is the traffic picking up significantly, or is that just a freak event? Do we know that?
I don't know. I can't answer that directly here in Plainfield, but I know the Canadian National is right in my backyard in Frankfurt, and the trains there have increased tremendously over the past 6 months. I can attest to that. But here in Plainfield, I don't know if any of the rest of the staff can address that issue.
If you're seeing the same thing I was seeing, then it looks like it's significant, and the trains have been long, and if they go 40 miles an hour, it's usually about 2 to 3 minutes, and that's tolerable. When they're going slow and they're that long, it's like 6 minutes and 3 of them in a half hour. That's maybe close to 15 minutes of downtime in a half hour. That's not good for our traffic. But that's just, we may want to monitor that if we get information as to how much the increase is. I know we talked at one time, we were originally doing this, they were going to, like a 6-fold increase in the number of cars going through. For the first 2 or 3 years, that didn't happen. It may have all of a sudden hit and whatever's happening, but it's different.
I think most people realize, if you haven't, I'll report it right now. And I am an outspoken critic of Canadian National. They are not, and I will go on record, good neighbors. They are out to do whatever they have to do for Canadian National, and under the guise of it's good for America, it's good for business. I have reported it, and fortunately we have a number of reporters who have reported it also. They left a train parked at a side lot over here for 7.5 hours without any engineers on it, unattended. This is the type of scenario that terrorists think, wow, that's a great idea. Why don't we go borrow a train or something? But the whole idea is Canadian National is really out for itself. I don't think it really worries about the village of Plainfield. I don't think it worries about the communities it goes through. They give some instruction in case of a disaster. Well, 1 year ago yesterday in Canada, 47 people died because of an unattended train was left on a hill, the brakes failed, and it went down into the community. I don't want to see that happen in the village of Plainfield. And so when you do have a concern that 3 trains are going through, look at what the trains are. Look at the composition of the trains. They're mostly fracked oil carriers, which is highly explosive. I don't know, we had United States Congressman Halderson came to our and discussed this with our village board about a month ago. The whole problem of what Canadian National is doing and what rail in the United States is doing. We have to monitor it, and if you have a concern, bring it to an authority. Don't sit there and say, oh, I really feel badly about this. Or if you see a violation that you think is a rail violation where a train is unattended, do something about it. Call the police. Call anybody you have to. But make sure that you're part of the solution and not part of the problem of allowing someone else to handle it. I'm going to get off the soapbox right now. But I want people to be aware of the fact that there is a problem and it is growing. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing, if I may, I will get on the soapbox. I think it would behoove the village if we could, perhaps Attorney Harvey, if we could look into drafting an ordinance regarding the blocking of the roadways. I know Chicago has one. I know as a young prosecutor, I spent a lot of time prosecuting those cases, and I think we should look into what it would take for us to pass an ordinance prohibiting the trains from stopping at least for an extended period of time and blocking our traffic.
Trustee Rippey has a great idea. I do remember reading that there was something that did restrict the ability for municipalities to impose fines for blocking the railroad crossings. I hope that's incorrect, and I hope that we actually can work on something, maybe at a committee meeting, and research this further. Thank you.
The state Supreme Court in 2009 actually ruled it was. Was it
Constitutional.
2009 or 2010 in January?
It's been the last 5 years. I was a Chicago police officer prior to Plainfield, and we used to write those left, right, up, down. Belt Railroad was the main contributor. And I know talking with Sergeant Eric Munson, it was about 5 years ago that, and I don't even know if it was the Illinois, I think it may have been the United States.
Actually, was it?
Yeah, I'm going to look it up. I'll get a hold of him. But they had said we as states and municipalities can't regulate train traffic and their travel.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that the community of Elwood's dealing with right now, and that's why it's also involving the Interstate Commerce Commission because of trains being so much a part of interstate commerce.
But we'll get the information to you.
Planning Department report. Building Department report.
No report.
Public Works report.
Yes, I just have briefly a few things. I have a couple of slides since we're talking about the emerald ash borer and the ash trees within the community. I wanted to give a real brief update as to where we're at. This is very similar to the budget discussion that we had before, but it has some up-to-date numbers as to where we're at before the board considers these two options. The first picture that you'll see here, and I pulled challenges out of here with the ash tree removal because it's right out of the budget presentation and documents. It's a little hard to see, at least from a distance on the screen, but this large ash tree is one of the largest ash trees that we have in the community, that we have in the parkway. It's on Illinois Street. It's not far from the library. It is, I'll have to defer to the people that live in the area. We're estimating well over 80 years old. We really won't know until the tree's been cut down. But this tree was relatively healthy looking last year. It really didn't show many signs of distress. And this year, the entire canopy, there isn't a leaf on the entire canopy. The only foliage that you find is down near the trunk. And this is one of the trees that will come down as part of the process, but a tree that is too large for us to cut down at Public Works with the equipment and manpower that we have, and most communities would contract this out. The diameter of the trunk is actually 54 inches, so this is one of the largest ash trees in town. It's a little sad in a way. The second slide that I have is in Whispering Creek. This is more typical of the larger trees that we have. This tree is about 30 inches in diameter, and it also needs to be removed. Again, another tree that looked very healthy last year, and this year is just completely dead. If you look at the next slide, our history, and it's hard to see with the dark writing on the bottom for the audience here, but I'll read off the numbers quickly. We started in 2011 with tree removals, and we recognized the infestation for the most part in the north part of the community and started within that area. And the infestation had spread quickly to the entire community, and so did our removals. Our removal process is to take down the trees with canopies that have at least 50% showing a death rate in at least 50% of the canopy or more, and knowing that the larger trees can pose a safety hazard potentially in the wintertime if they're left unattended for a year or 2 years or 3 years. That they need to be addressed. Ash trees, when they die, they can become brittle, and ice storms can be problematic. So the village is a policy, and within the budget documents, we remove trees that are over 50% dead as far as the canopy is concerned in that year, in that summer year and fall year before the winter comes. So our tree removals started out in 2011 at 112. In 2012, we removed 387. In 2013, we removed 1,008 trees. We were up to 1,008 trees last year. This year, we anticipate that we'll have to remove 1,400 trees, and these are throughout the community. Also, and actually, we're on the positive side. We're more progressive than many of our neighboring communities here as far as tree replacements, and the tree replacements have been through the Tree Consortium. In 2012, we started the tree replacement program. We added 467 trees. 2013, we were at 497. This year, we anticipate we'll be at 740 trees for replacements. And this is a discussion that we'll have to have with the consortium after this season because the availability of high-quality parkway trees is going to become an issue in the future. And the consortium notices, they recognize that, but they're not going to lower their standards as far as what they accept. So there'll be some challenges that we'll have in the future, even after the trees are removed. We were looking at a 5-year program to remove the ash trees, and Michael, if you can go to the next slide. We were looking at a 5-year program to remove all of the ash trees, and actually we're pretty well on track of that. It'll probably be closer to 6 years, but by the end of this year, we'll only have 2,360 approximate ash trees left compared to the original 5,300 trees that we had just 5 years ago. And you can see if we're removing 1,400 trees this year, it's highly likely that we'll remove the remaining 2,000 trees in the next 2 years. And then the replacements themselves will lag. So this is an update for the board and for the public too as well. Prior to the budget discussions, we'll do the final numbers as part of the budget discussions too as well. But we see this contractual services amount, which we did receive competitive proposals. The lowest proposal, or the lowest bidder, is provided within the consideration for the board tonight. We believe that this contractor will be able to remove approximately 200 of the larger trees that we have within the community, which will aid the Public Works Department. The Public Works Department will then, in turn, remove about 400 trees on our own before the end of the year. And then with the trees that were already removed earlier in the year and last winter, that will bring us up to that $1,400 number, or 1,400 tree number for a total. The second item for consideration is authorizing the purchase of approximately 500 parkway trees through the Tree Consortium. There are several communities, 37 municipalities that are involved in this. I'll name a couple. The biggest is probably Aurora out of the list. It has to be out of the list. But some of the other communities that Chip had recognized too as well: Downers Grove, Elmhurst, Evanston, Geneva, Maywood, New Lenox, Sugar Grove is probably one of the smaller ones, Oak Park, Oak Lawn. We're all in this together. But we are all seeking the best possible trees that we can find. And that's going to be one of the challenges I foresee for the following year, for the next budget year, is to find good quality parkway trees. But we're going to take one step at a time, and tonight staff is recommending approval of both of these items. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
If I can add on to what Mr. Persons just offered, as you know, this poor disease came through the port of Detroit, so I had the distinct professional pleasure, wasn't much of a pleasure, of having to deal with this. Trying to find trees was definitely a challenge, and I think Mr. Persons is being very responsive and responsible for coming to the board now and making the orders currently in place for trees that we won't get until after Thanksgiving. Frankly, in the where I was previously, we actually had to go to Maumee, Ohio in order to get trees. So we were driving 200 miles one way just to be able to find replacement trees because there was such a demand to get replacement trees. So I commend you on being ahead of the curve on that.
Thank you.
I move we authorize ArborTech, Inc., the contractor that provided the lowest proposal, to remove infested parkway trees at a cost not to exceed $100,000.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Rassich? Trustee Rippey?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries.
I move we waive the bidding and authorize the purchase and installation of approximately 500 parkway trees from the Suburban Tree Consortium at a cost not to exceed $150,000.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Rassich? Trustee Rippey?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Police Chief's report.
No report.
Attorney's report.
No report, thank you.
Reminders.
July 9th is Coffee with the Mayor. The 10th is the HPC. The 11th is Movie in the Park. The 14th is our next committee of the whole. On the 15th will be a planning commission meeting. And on the 17th will be our next concert in Settlersville.
We're seeking a motion to adjourn to executive session as permitted under the Open Meetings Act under Section 2C11 to discuss pending litigation not to reconvene.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. Trustee Benucci?
Yes.
Trustee Fay?
Yes.
Trustee Lamb?
Yes.
Trustee Peck?
Yes.
Trustee Rassich?
Yes.
Trustee Rippey?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries.